Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now, the question is, when do I harvest my potatoes? Well, some potatoes produce a flower, and when they do flower, that's usually a good indication that there are potatoes underneath there. However, they are probably far from the size you want, especially if you're growing main crop potatoes. With first earlies, you don't want them so big because you want them to be, the size of a hen's egg, so that they retain all that lovely sweetness and the lovely first early potato taste that you want. Now, you may particularly want to harvest your potatoes because it's getting to the time of year where you now need to plant something else. So you need to clear that crop. So there could be many reasons why you particularly want to harvest your potatoes. Now, if you're like myself and Mrs. W, there's generally these days only us two around now. The children have all grown up and they've gone their different ways. Although Sasha still is here with us. She's a 19-year-old girl now and she's out doing her jobs, and so we don't see that much of her. So in general, there is just myself and Mrs. W here. So the great thing about when you grow your own is that you can harvest things at the size you want them and when you want them. So if you don't need huge harvest of potatoes because there's only two of you, well, then you can decide to take your potato harvest whenever you want. And then lastly, I guess there's the person like me who simply cannot wait. And I sometimes do pull potatoes up. You saw a couple of videos back that I pulled a potato plant up. Wasn't full of potatoes, but I simply couldn't wait any longer. However, today what we are going to do is to show you how we harvest our potatoes in the No Dig garden. And we're going to start with the first early crop, which in our case we've grown Casablanca. Now, by experience, because I've grown Casablanca before, it usually produces its potatoes long before it's flowered. And indeed, if you let that grow on, those potatoes will grow quite big and you can use it actually as a second early crop. But we want some lovely new potatoes this evening to go with our evening meal. So here's the plant that we're going to harvest. And if you remember a few videos back, we actually had a look around these potatoes and we could see that there were potatoes there then. So in the No Dig garden, we don't use obviously spades or forks. All we do is get hold of the haulms and then pull. There. There is a harvest of potatoes. We can see the weeds now where some have come through, where we couldn't get to them because the potatoes were growing, so they can go. Now, potatoes form fairly near the surface, so you don't have to go too far before you find your potatoes, and then it's just a question of just scrapping around, pulling the soil back to see if there are indeed any more. So we get the trug. That's a harvest of Casablanca first early, and that's before it's produced all of its potatoes and it's produced its flowers. So there's more than enough there for myself and Mrs. W. And I can tell you now, looking at those, I'm really looking forward to them. So that's how we harvest potatoes in the No Dig garden. Of course, if you garden traditionally, you'll probably be using a fork. Try not to get too close to the potato haulm because you'll end up stabbing those potatoes, and angle the fork in. Try and avoid as many potatoes being speared as possible. Now, these potatoes still have some time to go, and I would hazard a guess that within the next fortnight or so we'll have quite bountiful harvests. I've only harvested this one now because I wanted to show you what this particular variety, Casablanca, you do get potatoes long before it's actually gone to flour, and you can have yourself a meal. So I want to take another look at the carrots. We were here a couple of weeks ago. We've had a fair bit of rain and sunshine over the last couple of weeks, and I would expect these to be of a nice size that we can actually harvest. So let's try one of these. Ah, there we are. They are getting there. Now this is a very apt variety because it's called Norwich, and we only live about 10 miles from Norwich. And anything that size and a little bigger, that's the sort of size carrots that myself and Mrs. W like to eat at this time of the year. Of course, when we sow our carrots ready for their autumn and winter harvest, then we let them get much bigger. But at this time of the year, it's so lovely to enjoy the sweetness of young carrots. And oh, that smells so carroty. So there you go, variety Norwich. And if you want to see when we sowed these carrots, go back in our playlists and look on the carrot playlist, and you'll see exactly the time of year that we sowed them here in Norfolk. Remember, we garden in zone 9A. And yeah, we now get to first week of June, and we've got some nice carrots that we can have on our plates. Now, of course, they won't all be like that. They all grow at different rates, but you can generally tell because you can start to see the shoulders popping through. The soil surface, which will give you an indication that there's a fair sized carrot there. And then what this will do, it will start to thin the carrots down. So look for the ones where you can actually see the shoulder tops, and like I say, it will start to thin those down. And you just leave the others just to grow on. What I would like today is a nice piece of Calabrese, and when we did the video on the dig versus no dig, and again you can find that video on our playlist, I did say to you that these grown away and seem to be much stronger plants, and that these would harvest first, and I said they would harvest June, and indeed they are. In fact, over the weekend when we had our family around, we've already had a couple of the Calabrese heads. Me and Mrs. W want one this evening, and there's a nice head. The variety is Marathon, and again it's the sort of size that would be fine for myself and Mrs. W. But what you do need to remember is that these, once they break into flowers, you start seeing them, the little yellow flower heads come out. That will render that plant not so good. So it's always a balance. When do you take the harvest? How long do you let it go on for? So always keep an eye on these, and if you start to see some yellow flakes starting to come, which is indicating it's getting ready to go to seed and flower, then harvest immediately. It wants to be a nice green head like this. Now this would grow on for another 5 days or so, a week, but we want this evening. And the other thing with Calabrese is that if you take the central head, you can leave these plants in situ and they will produce side shoots. In fact, you can see already this is starting to produce a side shoot, and you'll get a little bonus harvest of broccoli sized Calabrese. Now on the summer crop I don't tend to do that. When the next plants go in, which we'll harvest during the autumn, I will leave those then to produce their side shoots, because at that time of the year I can't actually plant any more of these. I can't sow and plant any more of these. So to give us that little bit extra, I do let them stay in the ground and they produce their side shoots that we can enjoy. But I have some more plants to go in here, and so I don't want to leave the plants behind. So let's harvest this head, and what you want to do is decide where you're going to harvest. All of this green stalk can be eaten, and indeed when you grow your own, because you're cutting them fresh, you can go quite a way down and it will be really soft and tender. So you see there's no resistance in that knife whatsoever. So I've taken off the larger leaves, but these that you see that I've left on here, they're perfectly edible, and you know, even the stalks to the leaf, they will taste pretty much like the main stalk that you see on here, and you can see just how tender that is. All of that can be eaten. It's, you know, you don't need to waste all of that, and that's certainly big enough for myself and Mrs. W. Always keep an eye on your Calabrese, and you know, as soon as you see any of the first signs of any of the little yellow specks coming on, which will indicate it's getting ready to flower, you want to be harvesting it. Once it does flower, then this vegetable has passed its best and simply doesn't taste as good as when you pick it when it's lovely and green like this. So there you have it. This is our early June tea time harvest, and as I said earlier on in the video, the great thing is that you can harvest your vegetables whenever you want. You haven't got to wait for them to arrive at the supermarket. You can just take them as and when you want. Let them grow as big as you like, let them be as small as you like. Well, one thing I can tell you, that you won't taste broccoli, potatoes or carrots quite like this unless you grow your own. We have picked a few of the overwintering spring onions. Now I'd like to thank you all for your kind comments about Poppy. As I said in the last video, she really was quite a poorly little girl on that Saturday evening, and we were really quite concerned about her. But the good news is that she really is very much back to her old self today. And yeah, we are extremely happy about that, as I'm sure you all are. As you know, we have plenty of animals with us, and we do care about them all and don't like to think of them not very well, but she really is well and truly back to her old ways. We shall see you on the next video.